Human warrior defends sacred temple reached its breathtaking apex as Damien became a living conduit for planet-shattering power. Channeling every sacred ley line through his mortal frame, he unleashed a blinding beam that obliterated the destroyer command ship. His sacrifice nearly killed him, until Halai's divine touch anchored his consciousness, fulfilling his wildest dream: survival against impossible odds. The crystalline spires of Vidian's shattered capital glowed faintly beneath the smoke of battle as dawn broke over the horizon. The once magnificent skyline, now fractured and broken, still managed to catch the first light of day, sending prismatic reflections across the rubble-strewn streets below. Damien stood at the edge of the landing pad, his tactical armor bearing the scars of a dozen worlds at war. As a human mercenary renowned for his strategic mind, he had been summoned to this distant planet to aid the Athani Temple Guard, a desperate measure in desperate times. The destruction wrought by the destroyer cults had reached a fevered pitch. What had begun as isolated attacks on outlying temples had escalated into a coordinated assault against the very heart of Vidian spirituality. These temples weren't merely places of worship. They were nexus points for the planet's ley lines, conduits of energy that sustained both the Athani civilization and their slumbering gods. Damien's shuttle had barely managed to pierce the orbital blockade, his pilot executing a series of maneuvers that would have made most passengers violently ill. But Damien had seen worse, survived worse, in the 17 years he'd spent as a soldier for hire. What made this contract different wasn't the pay, though it was substantial, or the odds, though they were long. It was the strange pull he'd felt the moment his shuttle entered Vidian's atmosphere. "Commander Damien," a voice called from behind him. He turned to see an Athani officer approaching, her crystalline armor glittering in the morning light. "I am Ketra, second commander of the Temple Guard. Your reputation precedes you." Damien nodded curtly. "As does the plight of your world. I've studied the tactical reports. The destroyers have you outgunned, outmaneuvered, and surrounded." Ketra's facial ridges tightened, the Athani equivalent of a grimace. "Yet you still came." "I go where I'm needed," Damien replied, then added with the hint of a smile, "and where the credits flow." Before Ketra could respond, the air crackled with energy. Both warriors looked up to see a massive destroyer ship breaking through the cloud cover, its hull pulsing with corrupted energy, the unmistakable signature of temple ley lines twisted to destructive purpose. "Incoming!" Ketra shouted, activating her shield gauntlet as the first salvo of orbital bombardment descended. The landing pad erupted in chaos. Temple guards scattered for cover, while defense cannons roared to life. Damien rolled behind a fallen pillar, tactical visor already calculating trajectories and identifying weak points in the enemy vessel. But as explosions rocked the platform around him, something else captured his attention, a pulsing sensation that seemed to resonate from deep within the temple complex. With each heartbeat, Damien felt drawn toward the central sanctuary. It wasn't fear or instinct driving him. It was something older, something primal that called to his very blood. As debris rained down around him, he made a decision that defied all tactical logic. "Where are you going?" Ketra shouted, as Damien broke from cover and sprinted toward the temple entrance. "Trust me," he called back, though he hardly trusted himself in that moment. The massive temple doors, carved from stone that seemed to shimmer between states of matter, parted at his approach. Damien hesitated for only a second before stepping across the threshold. His boot made contact with the ancient floor, and a ripple of energy, visible only to his eyes, spread outward from the point of impact. An omen that only he perceived. Inside, the temple's cavernous main hall stretched before him, seemingly untouched by the war raging outside. Bioluminescent glyphs lined the walls, pulsing in patterns that made Damien's vision swim if he stared too long. The pull was stronger now, guiding him past altars and archways, down corridors that seemed to bend reality around them. Guards stationed within the temple regarded him with suspicion, but made no move to stop him. Ketra must have communicated his clearance. Or perhaps they were simply too preoccupied with defending their sacred space from external threats to worry about one human moving deeper into the complex. After what felt like both moments and hours, Damien found himself before a final set of doors, these made of a material he couldn't identify, neither metal nor stone, but something that seemed to breathe with life. The symbols etched into their surface glowed brighter as he approached, as if recognizing something within him. With a sound like a sigh, the doors parted. The chamber beyond defied conventional architecture, its ceiling open to what appeared to be space itself, though Damien knew they were still deep within the temple. A pool of luminescent liquid occupied the center of the room, its surface perfectly still, despite the battle that surely continued above. And floating just above that pool, suspended in a cocoon of light, was a figure that stole Damien's breath. She was humanoid in form, but clearly divine in nature. Her skin shimmered with constellations. Her hair floated around her head like a nebula of stars. Though her eyes were closed, Damien knew instinctively that this was Halai, the sleeping goddess of the central temple, dormant for 3 millennia according to the briefing he'd received. Damien approached slowly, tactical mind momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer presence of divinity. This was well beyond his expertise. He was a soldier, a strategist, not a priest or acolyte. Yet the pull that had guided him here now urged him closer to the sleeping deity. A tremor shook the temple, stronger than those before. Dust fell from cracks forming in the mystical ceiling. The destroyers were getting closer. Without thinking, Damien reached out to steady himself against the edge of the pool, and his fingertips brushed against the light surrounding Halai. The contact lasted less than a second, but its effect was immediate and catastrophic. Energy surged through Damien's body, every nerve ending igniting with power beyond mortal comprehension. He tried to pull away, but found himself frozen, a conduit for something ancient awakening. Halai's eyes snapped open, radiant orbs of pure starlight that fixed immediately on Damien. The cocoon of energy surrounding her pulsed once, twice, then exploded outward in a shockwave that threw Damien across the chamber. When his vision cleared, the goddess was no longer floating, but standing beside the pool, her form more solid now, though still radiating divine light. She regarded Damien with an expression that mingled curiosity, confusion, and growing alarm. "Human," she spoke, her voice resonating not just in the air, but in Damien's mind. "You have awakened me before the appointed time." Damien struggled to his feet, fighting through the residual pain of divine contact. "Not intentionally," he managed to say. "Your temple, your world, is under attack." Halai's expression shifted, her starlight eyes narrowing. "The destroyers have returned." It wasn't a question. "They never left," Damien replied. "They've spent centuries corrupting temple ley lines across your planet, turning sacred energy into weapons of mass destruction. 3 of the 9 temple networks have already fallen." The goddess closed her eyes momentarily, and Damien sensed she was reaching out with senses beyond mortal comprehension, verifying his words. When she looked at him again, her gaze was sharper, more focused. "You see the patterns," she said, studying him with newfound interest. "The tactical flows of energy and intent. Your mind catalogs the enemy movements in ways few mortals can perceive." Damien blinked in surprise. "I'm a tactician. It's what I was hired to do." "No." Halai moved closer, her presence making the air around them vibrate with potential. "You are goddess-touched. There is something in your bloodline that resonates with our power." She reached out, her fingers stopping just short of touching his face. "How else could you have awakened me when all others have failed?" Before Damien could process this revelation, another explosion rocked the temple, much closer this time. The chamber's mystical architecture began to buckle under forces it was never designed to withstand. "They sense my awakening," Halai said, her form starting to glow brighter. "They will focus all their firepower on this temple now." "Then we need to move," Damien replied, tactical mind reasserting itself. "If they've detected your energy signature, they'll deploy their heaviest weapons to prevent you from fully manifesting your power." Halai tilted her head, studying the human with renewed interest. "You understand their strategy so quickly?" "It's what I would do if I were trying to kill a goddess," Damien answered grimly. For the first time, something like a smile crossed Halai's luminous face. Then perhaps the Athani were wise to bring a human tactician into their midst. She extended her hand. "Come, mortal. Let us show the destroyers what happens when divine power merges with tactical precision." Damien hesitated only a moment before taking her hand. The contact sent energy coursing through him again. But this time, it didn't overwhelm. It enhanced. His senses sharpened, his tactical awareness expanding beyond anything he'd experienced before. Together, they moved through the temple at impossible speed, past startled guards and crumbling architecture. When they emerged onto the battlefield outside, the scene was one of utter chaos. Destroyer ships filled the sky, their weapons raining destruction on the temple complex and surrounding city. Temple guards fought valiantly, but were clearly outmatched, their formations breaking under relentless assault. Halai rose into the air, pulling Damien with her. For a terrifying moment, he thought she meant to fly him straight into the maelstrom of enemy fire, but then he realized that was exactly her intention. "Their primary vessel!" Damien shouted over the wind, pointing to a massive ship hovering directly above the temple. "It's channeling corrupted leyline energy through those conduits on its underside." "I see it," Halai replied, her voice somehow clear despite the chaos. "And what would you suggest, tactician?" Despite their dire circumstances, Damien found himself analyzing the battlefield with unprecedented clarity. "Their shields are strongest at the bow and stern, standard configuration for vessels of that class. But there's a vulnerability where the corrupted energy feeds into their weapon systems." "Then that is where we strike," Halai declared, accelerating toward the massive ship. Enemy fire converged on them, but Halai moved with divine grace, weaving between energy blasts while maintaining their trajectory. As they neared the destroyer vessel, Damien saw the point where corrupted leyline energy, sickly green compared to the pure blue of Halai's power, flowed into the ship's main cannon. "There," he pointed. "Disrupt that flow and the feedback should cascade through their systems." Without hesitation, Halai thrust her free hand forward, sending a spear of pure divine energy straight into the vulnerable junction. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the corrupted energy lines began to pulse erratically, before exploding outward in a chain reaction that rippled across the massive ship's hull. The destroyer vessel listed to one side, secondary explosions blossoming across its surface as internal systems failed catastrophically. Halai flew them clear as the ship began a slow, inexorable descent toward the outskirts of the city. As they returned to the temple landing pad, Damien saw the effect their strike had on the battlefield below. The temple guards, witnessing their goddess in the sky, fought with renewed vigor. The remaining destroyer ships, bereft of their command vessel, began to pull back, their formation dissolving into disorganized retreat. They touched down among a circle of awestruck Athani warriors. Ketra pushed to the front, her expression caught between reverence for Halai and suspicion of Damien. "The goddess awakens," she announced, dropping to one knee. The other guards followed suit. Halai regarded them with ancient eyes. "Rise, my guardians. This is no time for ceremony. The destroyers retreat, but they will return in greater numbers once they realize what has occurred." "How is this possible?" A new voice entered the conversation as an elderly Athani in elaborate ceremonial armor approached. The prophecies spoke of your awakening only after all 9 temples were purified. The old ways have failed. High Commander Valon, Halai replied. It was this human who broke my slumber, this tactician with the sight. All eyes turned to Damien, who suddenly felt the weight of scrutiny from both mortal and divine sources. Impossible, Valon declared. No outsider could possibly... Yet he did, Halai interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. And without his tactical insight, the primary destroyer vessel would still be bombarding your position. Valen's facial ridges flattened in the Athani expression of displeasure. With all respect, Divine One, we cannot place our faith in a human mercenary, regardless of how he may have assisted in one battle. You hired me for my tactical expertise, Damien pointed out, meeting the High Commander's gaze. I just delivered better results than you expected. Before Valen could respond, Ketra stepped forward. High Commander, I witnessed their attack on the destroyer ship. It was extraordinary. The human guided our goddess to the vessel's weakness. A coincidence, Valon dismissed, or perhaps a trick to gain our trust. Halai's light pulsed brighter for a moment, her patience clearly wearing thin. The destroyers will return within hours. Council Elder. They seek to corrupt all 9 temple networks and invert the ley line's power into a weapon that could shatter this world. We do not have time for your suspicion. The tension in the air was palpable as Valon considered his options. Finally, he bowed his head slightly. As you command, Divine One, what would you have us do? Prepare your defenses, Halai instructed. Reinforce the remaining temples. I must consult with this tactician on our next move. Valen clearly wished to object, but thought better of it. With a curt nod, he turned and began issuing orders to the assembled temple guards. Ketra lingered a moment longer, her gaze moving between Halai and Damien with open curiosity, before she too departed to attend to her duties. When they were relatively alone, Damien turned to Halai. They don't trust me. They fear what they do not understand, Halai replied. And you, human, are beyond their understanding, as you are beginning to exceed your own. What did you mean about me being goddess-touched? Damien asked, the question that had been burning in his mind since her first mention of it. Halai studied him, starlight eyes seeming to peer through flesh and bone to something deeper. Come, there are archives within the temple that may provide answers. Answers I believe we both seek. As night fell over Vidian's capital, the temple complex took on an ethereal quality. Emergency repairs were underway across the structure, Athani engineers working to shore up sections damaged during the attack. Damien and Halai had spent hours poring over ancient holographic archives deep within the temple's secure vault, records dating back to the founding of Athani civilization. There, Halai said, manipulating the controls to enlarge a particular holographic entry. The first bonding. The image showed an Athani goddess, similar in appearance to Halai, though with subtle differences, standing beside a human male in what appeared to be ceremonial armor. Their hands were joined, energy visibly flowing between them. Goddess Meritri and Commander Julian, Halai narrated, the first recorded instance of human-divine partnership. Damien studied the image with growing fascination. When was this? Over 6,000 years ago, by your Earth calendar, Halai replied. Before the Great Slumber, when my kind walked more freely among mortals. And this Commander Julian was your ancestor, Halai finished for him. The resonance in your blood is unmistakable. Few humans carry the genetic markers of divine contact. Fewer still possess the capacity to channel our energy without being consumed by it. Damien stared at the ancient human in the hologram, trying to see any family resemblance across the millennia. Why wasn't this in any of the briefing materials I received? Because the Athani chose to forget, Halai said, a note of sadness in her voice. After the goddesses entered the Great Slumber, the temple elders rewrote much of their history. Humans were relegated to footnotes, allies of convenience rather than essential partners in Vidian's golden age. Damien absorbed this information slowly, its implications rippling through his understanding of his current contract. So, I'm not just a hired gun. I'm a descendant of those who once stood as equals to the divine, Halai confirmed. It is why you could awaken me when no Athani could. It is why you can see tactical patterns in energy flows that others miss. A comfortable silence fell between them as Damien processed this revelation. The holographic image continued to rotate slowly before them, the ancient human and goddess forever captured in their moment of connection. We should formulate a strategy for the coming attack, Damien eventually said, professional instincts reasserting themselves. Halai nodded, though her gaze lingered on him with an intensity that stirred something unexpected within Damien's chest. Yes, the destroyers will have adapted their approach based on today's defeat. They moved to a tactical display showing the status of Vidian's temple network. 6 temples remained uncorrupted, their ley lines glowing blue on the holographic map. The 3 fallen temples pulsed with sickly green energy, their power being siphoned toward destroyer strongholds. As they discussed defensive positions and counterattack possibilities, Damien became increasingly aware of Halai's proximity. When she reached across him to indicate a particular junction of ley lines, her luminous form brushed against his arm, sending a pleasant tingle of energy through his body. Their eyes met briefly, and Damien saw something beyond divine calculation in her starlight gaze, something almost human in its warmth. The moment stretched between them, laden with unspoken possibility. Then an alert chimed, breaking the spell. Ketra's voice came through the communication system. Divine Halai. Commander Damien, the Council requests your presence. Scout reports indicate unusual activity at the northern perimeter. Halai stepped back, her expression returning to divine composure. We will attend them immediately. As they made their way through the temple corridors, Damien found himself stealing glances at the goddess walking beside him. For a being of such power and ancient knowledge, there was something remarkably present about her, an immediacy and adaptability he hadn't expected from a deity. The council chamber was a circular room dominated by a large, holographic display of the planet's surface. Temple elders and military commanders stood in tense conversation, which halted abruptly when Halai and Damien entered. High Commander Valen stepped forward. Divine One, our forward scouts report the destroyers have seized control of the civilian settlement in the Kalora Valley. Thousands of our people are now their hostages. The holographic display shifted to show a sprawling settlement nestled between mountains, now surrounded by destroyer ships and ground forces. They've deployed resonance fields around the perimeter, Ketra added, highlighting a series of emitters on the map. Any attempt at conventional assault would trigger a cascade reaction, killing all hostages instantly. A trap, Damien observed, studying the deployment patterns. They know you've awakened, Halai. They're trying to force you to either sacrifice the civilians or surrender the central temple. Valen's facial ridges tightened. What would you know of their intentions, human? Enough to recognize a basic tactical gambit, Damien replied evenly. The destroyers need the central temple's power to complete their weapon. They know Halai won't abandon innocent lives, so they're creating a scenario where she has no choice but to yield. He is correct, Halai said, her light dimming slightly as she considered the situation. This is a stratagem designed to exploit compassion as weakness. Then, what do you propose? Valon challenged. We cannot abandon our people, nor can we surrender the temple. Damien stepped closer to the holographic display, tactical mind already formulating possibilities. What if we could shield the civilians from the resonance fields? Create a bubble of protective energy around them before we strike? Impossible, one of the temple elders objected. Our shields cannot penetrate their jamming technology. Not your shields, Damien said slowly, an idea taking shape. Halai's divine energy, channeled through someone who could move undetected among the destroyers. All eyes turned to him as the implication of his words became clear. You suggest using yourself as a conduit for divine power? Ketra asked, disbelief evident in her voice. It's been done before, Damien replied, gesturing toward the archives they had just been studying. The first bonding between Meritri and Julian. If I carry a portion of Halai's power, I could infiltrate the settlement, establish a protection field around the civilians, then signal for an external attack on the destroyers. The risk would be extreme, Halai warned, moving to stand beside him. To channel divine energy through a mortal frame, even one with your heritage, could burn you from within. Damien met her gaze steadily. What's the alternative? Watch thousands die? Surrender the temple and doom the entire planet? The council chamber erupted in debate, temple elders arguing vehemently against entrusting their goddess's power to a human mercenary. Through it all, Halai remained silent, her starlight eyes fixed on Damien with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. Finally, she raised a hand, and immediate silence fell. The decision is mine to make, she declared, and I choose to trust this human with my power. Prepare a strike force to attack when you receive his signal. Divine One, Valon protested. The risk is necessary, Halai finished for him. Sometimes salvation comes from unexpected sources. High Commander, it is time you remembered that. Preparations moved swiftly after that. While the temple guards readied for battle, Halai led Damien to a private chamber deep within the temple, a sacred space where the ley lines converged beneath a dome that opened to the stars above. This ritual has not been performed in thousands of years, Halai explained, as they stood facing each other in the center of the chamber. The transfer of divine essence to a mortal vessel requires intimate connection. Damien swallowed, suddenly aware of how the starlight playing across Halai's features made her both more divine and more beautifully human. I understand the risks. Do you? She moved closer, her luminosity intensifying. This is not merely about physical danger, Damien. To share divine essence is to share consciousness, memory, emotion. I will see into the depths of your being, and you into mine. I have nothing to hide, Damien replied, though he wondered if that was truly the case. His life as a mercenary had not always been honorable. Halai's lips curved in a small smile. Everyone has shadows they prefer to keep hidden, even goddesses. She raised her hands, palms facing upward. Damien mirrored the gesture, placing his palms against hers. The contact sent immediate waves of energy coursing through his arms. But he held steady, eyes locked with hers. Open yourself to me, Halai whispered, her voice resonating in both the air and his mind. Let the barriers between us thin. Damien tried to relax, to surrender to the process. It went against every survival instinct he'd honed through years of combat. The tactician in him always maintained control, always kept something in reserve. But as Halai's divine energy flowed into him, those instincts began to dissolve. Images flashed through his mind, memories that weren't his own. Halai walking among the Athani in ancient times. The decision to enter the great slumber as civilization advanced beyond the need for direct divine guidance. The long, dream-filled centuries of dormancy, aware yet not aware of the world changing above. In turn, he felt her presence moving through his memories, his childhood on a struggling colony world, the attack that orphaned him at 14, the years of military service followed by the freedom and moral ambiguity of mercenary work, the emptiness that had driven him from contract to contract, seeking something he couldn't name. Through it all, a growing warmth spread between them, an understanding deeper than words, a connection beyond the physical or even the spiritual. As divine energy continued to pour into him, Damien's senses expanded beyond mortal limits. He could perceive the ley lines running beneath the temple, the energy signatures of every Athani within the complex, the distant, corrupted power of the destroyer strongholds. When Halai finally broke the connection, Damien gasped, falling to his knees as his body adjusted to the divine power now contained within his mortal frame. His skin glowed faintly from within, reminiscent of Halai's luminosity, though less intense. "You accepted more than I expected," Halai said, kneeling beside him. Her own light had dimmed somewhat, a portion of her power now residing within him. "Is that a problem?" Damien asked, his voice sounding strange to his own ears, deeper, with a subtle resonance it hadn't possessed before. "It speaks to your capacity," she replied, helping him to his feet, "and perhaps to something else between us." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Damien knew she had felt it too. The unexpected harmony of their minds, the resonance that went beyond tactical alliance or even ancestral connection. Something new was forming between human and goddess, something neither had anticipated. "I should go," Damien said, though he made no move to step away from her. "The longer we wait, the more time the destroyers have to prepare." Halai nodded, but her hands lingered on his arms. "When you reach the settlement, find its center. The divine energy will naturally want to expand outward. You must guide it, shape it into a dome that encompasses all civilians, but excludes destroyer forces. And after that, signal the attack, then find your way clear before the temple guards strike," she instructed. "I will be monitoring through our connection. If you are in danger, I will know." Damien nodded, then, acting on impulse, raised one hand to her face. The contact sent sparks of energy between them, but neither pulled away. "I will return," he promised. "See that you do, human," Halai replied, the formality of her words belied by the emotion in her starlight eyes. "I have only just awakened. I would not lose my tactician so soon." The infiltration began 3 hours later, using a captured destroyer scout vessel. Damien approached the Kalora Valley settlement from the south, keeping to the shadow of the mountains. The divine energy within him responded to his tactical intentions, muting its signature to avoid early detection. As he neared the settlement perimeter, he abandoned the vessel and continued on foot, using the enhanced senses granted by Halai's power to avoid destroyer patrols. The resonance fields Ketra had identified were visible to him now, sickly green barriers of energy surrounding the settlement, ready to collapse inward at the first sign of attack. Finding a gap in the patrol pattern, Damien slipped through the perimeter and into the settlement proper. The situation inside was worse than the scout reports had indicated. Civilians huddled in homes and communal buildings, while destroyer cultists stalked the streets, their armor corrupted by the same sickly energy that powered their weapons. Moving from shadow to shadow, Damien made his way toward the settlement center, a circular plaza dominated by what appeared to be a communication tower. Destroyer forces were concentrated here, maintaining the resonance field generators and keeping watch over the most densely populated area. Damien observed their patterns from concealment, identifying the command structure and vulnerabilities. Standard destroyer protocol placed the field controls within their most heavily defended position, likely inside the communications tower itself. Disabling those controls would be impossible without alerting the entire destroyer force. But that wasn't Damien's mission. He needed to protect the civilians first, then worry about the enemy response. Finding a relatively secluded alley with a clear line of sight to the plaza, Damien prepared himself for what came next. He closed his eyes, focusing on the divine energy Halai had entrusted to him. It responded eagerly, almost joyfully, to his call, like a living thing that had been waiting for his command. "Now or never," he whispered to himself. With a deep breath, Damien stepped into the open and released the divine power within him. It exploded outward in a wave of pure blue energy, expanding rapidly to form a dome that encompassed the entire settlement center. Destroyer cultists screamed as the divine light touched their corrupted armor, burning away the sickly green energy that powered their weapons. Civilians looked up in awe as the blue dome continued to expand, rolling outward to cover more of the settlement with each passing second. Damien remained at its center, arms outstretched, guiding the flow of divine power as Halai had instructed. Through their connection, he felt her presence, distant but watchful, lending him strength as the effort of maintaining the shield began to tax his mortal frame. His skin glowed brighter, veins visible as channels of divine light beneath the surface. When the dome had expanded to cover the entire civilian population, Damien activated the signal beacon concealed in his armor. A pulse of coded energy shot skyward, piercing through both the divine shield and the destroyer's resonance field. The response was immediate and devastating. Temple guard ships descended from above, their weapons targeting destroyer positions with surgical precision. The resonance field generators, rendered inoperative by Damien's divine shield, could not be triggered to harm the hostages. Destroyer cultists scrambled to respond, but caught between the divine shield burning away their corrupted energy and the temple guard attack from above. Their forces quickly fell into disarray. Damien maintained the shield, even as the effort caused blood vessels to burst in his eyes and nose. Through the pain, he became aware of a new threat. The destroyer commander, a tall figure in ornate, corrupted armor, had emerged from the communications tower and was approaching the shield, carrying what appeared to be a containment device designed to capture divine energy. "Halai!" Damien gasped through their connection. "They're trying to trap the divine essence." Her response came as a surge of additional power, flowing through their bond and into the shield. The sudden influx nearly knocked Damien unconscious, but he channeled it directly toward the approaching destroyer commander. The shield pulsed, then extended a tendril of pure divine energy that struck the commander like a spear of light. The containment device shattered, releasing a backwash of corrupted energy that consumed its bearer in a flash of sickly green flame. With their command structure destroyed and their hostage plan in ruins, the remaining destroyer forces began a chaotic retreat. Temple guard ships pursued, while ground forces moved in to secure the settlement and evacuate civilians. Damien, his strength nearly exhausted, struggled to maintain the shield until the last civilians were clear. When Ketra's voice came through his communication device confirming the evacuation was complete, he finally released his hold on the divine energy. The shield collapsed, and Damien collapsed with it. His mortal body pushed beyond its limits by channeling divine power for so long. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was a streak of blue light descending from the sky, Halai coming for him. He awoke in a healing chamber within the central temple, his body floating in a pool of regenerative fluid. Halai sat beside the pool, her luminous form dimmed to a gentle glow that wouldn't strain his recovering senses. "Welcome back, tactician," she said softly, when she noticed his eyes open. "You nearly joined the divine realm permanently." Damien attempted to speak, but found his throat too dry. Halai offered him a crystalline cup filled with a glowing liquid. "Drink. It will restore what was burned away." The liquid tasted of starlight and mountain springs, instantly revitalizing his parched tissues. When he could finally speak, his voice was rough but functional. "The civilians?" "Safe," Halai assured him. The temple guards evacuated all 8,643 residents of Kalora Valley. They are being housed in secure facilities beneath this temple. "And the destroyers?" "In retreat, for now," she replied. "Your strategy succeeded beyond all expectations. The council is impressed." Damien managed a weak smile. "Even Valon?" "Especially Valon," Halai said, amusement evident in her tone. "Though he would die before admitting it openly." Attempting to sit up, Damien discovered his body was still too weak to comply. Halai gently pressed him back into the healing pool. Rest. Your mortal frame endured energies it was never designed to channel. The fact that you survived at all is testament to your divine heritage. How long was I unconscious? 3 days, Halai answered, during which the destroyers regrouped and launched attacks against 2 more temples. Alarm shot through Damien. What happened? Were you able to— Peace, tactician. Halai interrupted, placing a luminous hand on his chest. The contact sent pleasant warmth spreading through his body. The attacks were repelled. Your tactical insights, combined with my awakened power, have given the temple guards new strategies for defense. Damien relaxed slightly, though concern still nagged at him. But they'll keep coming. As long as they control the corrupted temples, they can continue to draw power for their weapons. Yes, Halai agreed, her expression growing serious. Which is why we must take the offensive, purify the corrupted temples, and restore the ley line network to its proper function. How? The destroyers will have fortified those positions, knowing they're their primary power source. Halai's starlight eyes met his, and Damien saw determination there, and something more. Something that made his heart beat faster despite his weakened state. Together, she said simply, as it was in ancient times, divine power guided by tactical precision. Like Meritri and Julian, Damien murmured, remembering the holographic image of the first human-goddess pair. Yes, Halai confirmed, her light pulsing slightly brighter. Our connection has only grown stronger since the ritual. When you are healed, we will forge a more permanent bond, one that will allow us to coordinate our powers more effectively. The implications of her words hung in the air between them. Damien studied her luminous features, searching for signs of reluctance or duty-bound resignation, but found only sincere determination, and that same warmth he'd glimpsed before. Is that what you want? He asked quietly. A permanent bond with a mortal? Halai's expression softened. 3,000 years of slumber gives one ample time to consider what truly matters. Damien, I awakened expecting to find a world that had moved beyond the need for gods. Instead, I found a world in peril, and a human with the courage to stand against impossible odds. She leaned closer, her starlight illuminating his face. What I want is to protect this world and its people. And I have discovered, somewhat to my surprise, that what I want is also you, tactician. Before Damien could respond, the chamber door opened to admit Ketra, who froze momentarily at the scene before her. Divine One, she said, bowing slightly. The council requests your presence. The destroyers have sent a communication. Halai straightened, divine composure returning to her features. I will attend them. She turned back to Damien. Rest and recover your strength. We have much to discuss when I return. As she departed with Ketra, Damien sank back into the healing pool, his mind replaying her words. A goddess had just admitted to wanting him, not merely as a tactical asset or divine conduit, but as— what? A partner? Something more? The next week passed in a blur of recovery and planning. As Damien's strength returned, he and Halai spent hours in strategic consultation with the Temple Council, plotting the reclamation of the corrupted temples. The destroyers had fortified these positions extensively, converting sacred sites into weapons platforms that channeled corrupted ley line energy into their fleet. Between strategy sessions, Damien and Halai found moments of privacy to explore their growing connection. The divine energy she had shared with him had created a permanent link between them. He could sense her presence anywhere within the temple complex, could feel echoes of her emotions and thoughts. One evening, as they stood on a high balcony overlooking the slowly rebuilding city, Halai explained the nature of the permanent bond she had proposed. In the ancient days, when goddesses walked freely among mortals, Such partnerships were not uncommon, she said. Her luminosity softened to a gentle glow in the twilight. Divine and mortal, each complementing the other's nature. The goddess providing power and cosmic awareness, the mortal providing focus, adaptability, and connection to the physical world. "And what happens to the mortal when they die?" Damien asked, voicing the question that had been troubling him. "Do they simply end while the goddess continues for eternity?" Halai turned to face him fully, starlight eyes searching his. "Is that what concerns you? The disparity in our lifespans?" "Among other things," Damien admitted. "I'm a mercenary, Halai. I've lived by a simple code. Complete the contract, collect payment, move on. I've never stayed anywhere long enough to build something lasting." And now, Damien looked out over the city, where temple spires were being rebuilt with new defensive capabilities based on his tactical designs. "Now I find myself caring about this world, about its people." He turned back to her. "About you." Halai smiled, her light pulsing slightly brighter. "Then perhaps it is time for both of us to build something new." She extended her hand, palm up. "The choice is yours, Damien. I will not compel you." After a moment's hesitation, he placed his hand in hers. The now familiar surge of energy flowed between them. But this time, it felt like coming home, like completing a circuit that had always been meant to connect. "When we reclaim the corrupted temples," Halai said softly, "when Vidian is safe again, what then, tactician? Will you collect your payment and move on?" "No," Damien replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Not this time." The first temple reclamation operation began at dawn 3 days later. The smallest of the corrupted temples lay in Vidian's eastern province, nestled within a range of crystalline mountains. Destroyer forces had converted the sacred site into a resonance amplifier, using it to extend their jamming field across the entire region. Damien and Halai approached from above, her divine flight carrying them beyond the range of conventional defenses. The permanent bond they had established allowed Damien to share in her divine senses, perceiving the twisted ley lines that pulsed beneath the temple with sickly green energy. "The corruption runs deep," Halai observed as they hovered above the temple complex. "They've inverted the sacred geometry, turning purification chambers into corruption accelerators." Damien's tactical mind processed the energy flows, identifying critical nodes and vulnerabilities. "There," he pointed to a spire rising from the temple's northern quadrant. "That's their primary conduit. If we can purify that nexus point first, the rest of the ley lines should be easier to cleanse." Halai nodded, her form glowing brighter as she gathered divine power. "The destroyers will sense my approach. We will have minutes at most before they redirect their fleet to defend this position." "Then we'll be quick," Damien replied with a grim smile. "Ready?" In answer, Halai accelerated downward, divine light trailing behind them like a comet's tail. Destroyer defensive systems activated immediately, filling the air with pulses of corrupted energy. Halai wove between them with impossible grace, her divine reflexes enhanced by Damien's tactical awareness of enemy firing patterns. They landed on the temple roof, sending a shockwave of divine energy outward that temporarily disrupted the closest defense emplacements. Without hesitation, they moved toward the primary conduit, destroyer cultists scrambling to intercept them. "Hold them off," Damien said, drawing the modulated energy pistol that the temple armorers had crafted for him. "I'll set the purification charges." While Halai engaged the cultists, her divine light burning away their corrupted armor, Damien placed specially designed crystal charges at key points along the conduit. Each charge contained a concentrated essence of pure ley line energy, harvested from the central temple and calibrated to reverse the corruption process. "Charges set," he called to Halai, who immediately disengaged from combat and flew to his side. Activating purification sequence, she responded, placing her hands on the primary crystal. Divine energy flowed from her into the charge, which began to pulse with blue light. The effect rippled outward through the network of charges Damien had placed. One by one, they activated, sending pulses of pure energy into the corrupted ley lines. The sickly green glow that had pervaded the temple began to recede, replaced by the natural blue luminescence of uncorrupted power. Destroyer cultists howled in rage and pain as their corrupted armor failed, the source of their power being systematically cleansed. Those who could fled toward waiting ships, while others collapsed as the corruption that had sustained them was purged. The purification process accelerated, ley lines throughout the temple complex returning to their natural state in a cascade of blue light. As the final corrupted node was cleansed, a pillar of pure energy erupted from the temple's central chamber, shooting skyward to reconnect with Vidian's planetary network. Halai's form glowed brighter in response, her connection to the planet's sacred geometry strengthened by the temple's return to the network. "One down," Damien said, checking the tactical display built into his armor's gauntlet. "But we've got incoming. Destroyer fleet signatures approaching from the west." "Then our work here is done for now," Halai replied. "The temple will continue purifying itself. We must return to base and prepare for the next reclamation." As they soared away from the cleansed temple, destroyer ships arrived too late to prevent their escape. The operation had been a complete success, the first step in reclaiming Vidian's sacred network. Over the following weeks, Damien and Halai conducted similar operations at the remaining corrupted temples. Each reclamation strengthened Halai's power and weakened the destroyer's hold on the planet. Each shared mission deepened the bond between mortal tactician and awakened goddess. Between operations, they worked closely with the Temple Council to rebuild Vidian's defensive capabilities. The Athani, witnessing the effectiveness of their partnership, gradually set aside their suspicion of the human in their midst. Even High Commander Valen came to grudgingly respect Damien's tactical insights, though he remained wary of the deepening connection between mortal and divine. After the successful reclamation of the second corrupted temple, Ketra approached Damien as he studied tactical projections in the command center. "You fight well, human," she said, the Athani equivalent of high praise. "The Divine One has chosen her partner wisely." Damien looked up from the displays. "Partner." Ketra's facial ridges shifted in what he had come to recognize as an expression of amusement. "Do not pretend ignorance. The bond between you is visible to all with eyes to see." "Is that a problem for your people?" "For some, perhaps," she admitted. "Traditions run deep among the Athani. But traditions failed to prevent the destroyer corruption, failed to awaken our goddess. You succeeded where our rituals did not. That has challenged many assumptions." Before Damien could respond, an alert sounded throughout the command center. Tactical displays shifted to show a massive destroyer fleet approaching Vidian's capital, the largest concentration of enemy forces they had yet encountered. "They're making their move," Damien observed, studying the fleet formation. "They know we've been reclaiming the temples. This is their counterattack." Halai appeared beside them, her luminous form materializing from pure energy. "The destroyers have committed their remaining forces to this assault. They mean to take the central temple at any cost." "Then we stop them here," Damien declared, already formulating tactical options. "If we can defeat this fleet, the destroyers will have nothing left to threaten Vidian with." The battle that followed was unlike anything Vidian had witnessed in thousands of years. Destroyer ships darkened the sky above the capital, their weapons raining corrupted energy on temple defenses. The Athani responded with everything they had: temple guard vessels, ground-based defense systems, and the pure energy of the reclaimed ley lines channeled through specially designed emplacements. At the heart of the defense stood Damien and Halai, their bond allowing them to coordinate divine power with tactical precision. From the central temple's highest spire, They directed the flow of battle, identifying vulnerabilities in the destroyer formation and exploiting them with devastating effect. But the destroyers had committed too many resources to be easily defeated. Their command ship, a massive vessel that dwarfed all others, hung back beyond the range of temple defenses, directing the assault with calculated malice. "The command ship is the key," Damien said, observing how enemy vessels realigned their formation whenever the temple guard made progress. "It's coordinating their entire attack pattern. If we can take it out, their fleet will fall into disarray." "It remains beyond our reach," Halai noted. "Even my divine flight cannot carry us there safely through such concentrated fire." Damien studied the tactical display, mind racing through possibilities. Then his eyes fell on the leyline map of the temple complex, and an idea began to form. Dangerous, possibly suicidal, but potentially decisive. "What if we channeled the entire leyline network?" he asked slowly. "Not just this temple, but all the reclaimed temples, focused through a single point?" Halai's starlight eyes widened as she grasped his meaning. "You suggest using the ley lines as a weapon?" "As a beam," Damien clarified. "Focused and directed at the command ship, the kind of power that could pierce their shields, no matter the distance. Such power would require a conduit," Halai said, concern evident in her voice. "No conventional system could channel that much energy." Damien met her gaze steadily. "I know." Understanding dawned in her luminous eyes. "No, the strain would destroy you, Damien. Even with our bond, even with your divine heritage, no mortal frame could withstand being a conduit for that much power." "We don't have a choice," Damien insisted, gesturing to the battle raging around the temple. "Their numbers are too great. We're losing ground by the minute. If that command ship isn't destroyed, they'll eventually break through." Halai's form pulsed with emotion, fear, denial, but also growing recognition of the tactical truth in his words. "There must be another way." "If there is, we don't have time to find it," Damien replied gently. He took her luminous hands in his. "This is why I'm here, Halai. This is what our bond was meant for, not just for small victories, but for the decisive one." For a long moment, the goddess was silent, internal light fluctuating with the intensity of her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. "If we do this, I will anchor you," she declared. "My divine essence will flow through you. Yes, but also around you, a shield against total consumption." "Will that work?" "I do not know," she admitted, "but I will not lose you without trying everything within my power to preserve you." The decision made, they moved quickly to the temple's core chamber, where the main ley line nexus pulsed beneath a crystalline floor. Temple guards and priests, sensing the gravity of the moment, cleared a path for them without question. In the nexus chamber, Damien stood at the center while Halai worked with temple engineers to reconfigure the ley line conductors. Through their bond, he could feel her determination and fear in equal measure, and beneath both, a depth of feeling that mirrored his own. "The network is aligned," Halai announced when the preparations were complete. "All reclaimed temples are channeling their energy into this nexus. When activated, the power will flow through you and be directed by our combined will toward the target." Damien nodded, removing the tactical armor that had protected him through so many battles. The channeling would work better with direct contact between his skin and the nexus point. "Damien," Halai said softly, floating to his side. When this is over." He smiled at her hesitation, so human a gesture from a divine being. "When this is over, we'll talk about what comes next. Together." She reached out, touching his face with luminous fingers. "Together," she echoed, then leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss sent divine energy coursing through him. Not painful, but exhilarating. A promise of something beyond the coming trial. When she pulled away, Her starlight eyes held his for a moment longer. Then, she took her position, standing behind him with hands resting lightly on his shoulders. "Ready?" she asked. Damien took a deep breath, centering himself as he had before countless battles. "Ready." Halai gave the signal. Temple engineers activated the ley line convergence sequence, and power began to flow into the nexus beneath Damien's feet. At first, it was manageable, a steady warmth rising through his body, guided by Halai's divine presence wrapped protectively around his consciousness. But as more ley lines connected to the network, the power intensified exponentially. Damien gritted his teeth against the sensation of his very atoms vibrating with energy. Through their bond, he could feel Halai struggling to contain the flow, to prevent it from simply incinerating him where he stood. "Focus on the target," she whispered in his mind. "See it. Will the energy toward it." Damien forced his consciousness outward, beyond the temple walls, above the battlefield where Athani and destroyer forces clashed. There, hanging in low orbit like a malevolent star, was the destroyer command ship, its hull pulsing with stolen ley line energy. The final temple connected to the network, and power surged through Damien with catastrophic force. His skin began to glow from within, veins and arteries visible as channels of pure light beneath the surface. His eyes, when he opened them, shone with the same starlight radiance as Halai's. "Now!" Halai commanded, her own divine power merging with the ley line energy coursing through Damien. With a cry that was both agony and exultation, Damien released the accumulated power in a single, focused beam. It erupted from his outstretched hands, punching through the temple ceiling and into the sky, a pillar of blue-white energy that split the clouds and struck the destroyer command ship with planet-shattering force. The impact was visible even from the ground, a blinding flash as the beam pierced the command ship's shields and hull in a single moment, followed by a chain reaction of explosions that rippled across the massive vessel. Secondary detonations bloomed as corrupted energy cells ruptured, turning the destroyer flagship into an expanding ball of fire against the darkening sky. In the temple below, Damien collapsed as the energy flow abruptly ceased. Halai caught him before he hit the floor, cradling his glowing form in her luminous arms. His consciousness flickered at the edge of oblivion, mortal body pushed far beyond its natural limits. "Stay with me, tactician!" Halai's voice reached him through layers of pain and disorientation. "Your task is not complete. Your contract is not fulfilled." Somehow, the reminder of his mercenary status, so at odds with what had grown between them, pierced the fog of near death. Damien's eyes fluttered open, though they still burned with residual divine light. "Always renegotiating terms," he managed to whisper. Relief washed through their bond as Halai realized he would survive. "Rest now," she said, gathering him closer. "The battle turns in our favor." Indeed, with their command ship destroyed and their coordinated attack pattern shattered, the destroyer fleet fell into disarray. Temple Guard vessels pressed their advantage, methodically eliminating enemy ships that had lost both direction and purpose. By nightfall, the sky above Vidian's capital was clear of enemy vessels for the first time in months. The destroyer threat had been broken, their leadership destroyed, their corrupted power source reclaimed. Damien's recovery took weeks. The channeling of so much divine energy had fundamentally altered his physical form, not destroying it, as Halai had feared, but transforming it into something between mortal and divine. His skin retained a subtle luminescence, visible in darkness, and his eyes occasionally flashed with starlight when emotions ran high. Through it all, Halai remained by his side, her divine presence a constant comfort as he adjusted to his changed nature. Their bond had deepened beyond what either had thought possible, transcending the tactical partnership that had begun it, and becoming something ancient texts had only hinted at, true union of mortal and divine. As Vidian rebuilt, the Temple Council debated the future of their world and its relationship with the awakened goddess. Some advocated a return to tradition, with Halai resuming her role as distant deity, guiding from afar but separate from mortal concerns. Others, led by Ketra, argued for a new approach, recognizing that the old ways had failed to prevent the destroyer threat. The debate came to a head 6 weeks after the final battle, in a formal council session attended by all temple elders, military commanders, and prominent citizens. Halai and Damien were called to address the assembly regarding their intentions. High Commander Valen, ever the traditionalist, spoke first. Divine Halai, with the destroyer threat eliminated, will you now return to your sacred chamber? The people of Vidian would be honored by your continued guidance. Before Halai could respond, another elder interjected. And what of the human? His contract is fulfilled. Surely he will return to his mercenary ways among the stars. Damien and Halai exchanged a glance, a silent communication flowing through their bond. Then Halai stepped forward, her luminous form commanding immediate attention. People of Vidian, she began, her voice resonating through the chamber. For 3,000 years, I slumbered while your civilization evolved. I awakened to find tradition had become rigid doctrine, and ancient partnerships forgotten. She gestured toward Damien. This human did not simply fulfill a contract. He awakened me when all your rituals failed. He risked his life repeatedly for a world not his own. He nearly sacrificed his mortal existence to channel the power that saved this planet. Damien moved to stand beside her, his subtly glowing skin a visible reminder of that sacrifice. I came to Vidian as a mercenary, he acknowledged. I stayed because I found something worth fighting for, worth living for. Murmurs spread through the assembly as the implication of their words became clear. Halai continued, her light pulsing with the intensity of her conviction. The ancient texts speak of divine mortal partnerships not as legend, but as history, she said. What was once common became forgotten, but the power of such bonds remains undiminished, as our victory against the destroyers proved. You suggest a permanent arrangement? Valon asked, his tone careful, but his disapproval evident in the flattening of his facial ridges. I declare it, Halai corrected. Damien and I are bonded beyond separation. Where I go, he goes. What I build, he builds beside me. The chamber erupted in a mixture of outrage, confusion, and grudging acceptance. Some elders stormed out in protest, while others watched with thoughtful expressions as centuries of tradition were reshaped before their eyes. When the initial furor subsided, Ketra stepped forward. Divine One, if you choose this path, what becomes of your duties to Vidian, of our people's need for your guidance? Halai's expression softened. I do not abandon Vidian, Ketra, but neither will I return to distant slumber. The time has come for goddess and mortals to walk side by side once more, not in rigid hierarchy, but in true partnership. She turned to Damien, taking his hand in hers. The contact sent visible ripples of energy between them. We will establish a new order, one that honors tradition but embraces evolution, one that remembers the ancient bonds between human and divine that once made both civilizations stronger. As the council debated this declaration, Damien leaned closer to Halai. You're changing their entire society, he murmured. Are you sure about this? Their society was already changing, she replied through their bond. I merely acknowledge what must be, rather than cling to what was. The debate continued for hours, eventually reaching a compromise that satisfied most factions. Halai would remain active in Vidian affairs, guiding the reconstruction and establishing new defenses against potential future threats. But she would also be free to explore the wider universe with her human partner, to learn and grow beyond the boundaries of traditional godhood. In the days that followed, as preparations were made for their departure, Damien found himself on the same landing pad where he had first arrived on Vidian. The signs of battle had been cleared away, the damage repaired, but he could still remember the pull he'd felt that first day, the mysterious force that had drawn him to the temple and changed his life forever. Having second thoughts, "Tactician?" Halai asked, materializing beside him in a shimmer of divine light. Damien smiled, still marveling at how she could read his moods even without their direct bond. Just remembering the beginning, wondering about the path that led here. And where it leads next? She moved closer. Her luminosity adjusted to a gentle glow that complemented the sunset painting Vidian's reconstructed skyline. "Earth," Damien said, the decision one they had reached together after much discussion. "I want you to see where humanity began, and I want to learn more about my own heritage, the bloodline that connected me to you before we ever met." Halai nodded, her starlight eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "A journey of discovery for us both. I have never walked among humans on their homeworld." "They'll be surprised by you," Damien warned with a chuckle. "As I am continually surprised by them," she replied, reaching out to touch his face. "By you." Behind them, the vessel that would carry them to Earth gleamed in the last light of day. A gift from the Temple Council, equipped with both advanced Athani technology and modifications to accommodate Halai's divine nature. It represented something unprecedented in recent Vidian history, a goddess choosing to explore rather than to simply be worshipped. "Are you ready?" Damien asked, as they walked toward the waiting ship. Halai's light pulsed with anticipation and joy. "To begin our next chapter? Always." As they boarded the vessel, Damien looked back one last time at the world where he had found purpose beyond credits, connection beyond tactical alliance, and love beyond mortal understanding. The crystalline spires of Vidian's capital glowed with renewed vigor, ley lines pulsing beneath the surface in healthy blue patterns. The ship's engines hummed to life, lifting them gently from the landing pad. As they rose into the darkening sky, Halai stood beside Damien at the viewport, her luminous form reflected in the transparent surface. "What is that expression humans use?" she asked. "For journeys of great significance." Damien smiled, taking her hand as the ship accelerated toward the stars. "Once upon a time." Halai's light brightened with pleasure at the phrase. "Yes, once upon a time, a human tactician and an awakened goddess set forth among the stars, bound by war, love, and destiny." The ship slipped into faster-than-light travel, leaving Vidian behind in a streak of starlight, carrying with it two souls who had found in each other something neither had known they sought.